found a Skittles wrapper in my wife's backpack. And I remember I felt so betrayed. We were pinching pennies. I remember she came home from school and I held it up. I'm like, tears in my eyes, Clint, what is this?
All right, everybody, welcome to the Have It All Show with Kris Krohn. Kris, super excited to be here with you today and jam a little bit on kind of an interesting trend that I found on TikTok recently. There was a question posed to a young man. He was standing on a beach, right? And it said this, if you just inherited $1 million, how do you take that $1 million and turn it into $5 million in 5 years? His answer was, I would start a business, I guess. Kris, what would you do?
I'd start a business, I guess. I like that. Okay, well, listen, first of all, welcome everybody. And if you inherited $1 million and it's like, okay, to be a good steward, you got to multiply. You got to turn it into 5 million in 5 years, which basically means you got to get a 500% ROI over 5 years. So first thing I like to do is do the math. If I got to turn 1 into 5, and that's a 500% increase, then I got to say, great, how much time do I have to get 500%? I have 5 years. 500% divided by 5 years means I've got to find something where I can earn 100% a year on my money. First of all, do y'all see that it's not a tactic? You have to know the standard. And the standard of turning 1 million into 5 million in 5 years, you have to understand what your ROI is you have to hit. Whatever it is that I am going to pick and whatever it is I'm about to talk about, as long as I can make 100% a year on my money, then in 5 years, I'm going to have 5 times more money. And with compounding, it's actually going to be, with compounding effect, I probably only need to make more like 75%. And with the rule of 72, that'll probably amortize out to a 500% return. So you got to be asking yourself, where do I get 75 to 100% a year on my money?
I'm wondering.
Okay, so first of all, can I do that through a 401k?
I would say no.
No. Can I do it in an IRA or any other qualified funds?
I would say no.
Okay, great. So then you say, well, what about the S&P 500?
What about that S&P 500?
The S&P 500 is going to earn you right now. The 30-year average, they'll claim is 10%, but fee structure, everything else, 30-year average is closer to actually 6 or 7%.
That's not going to get us there.
No, so it's not going to. So you are short. That'll give you a tenth of what you actually need. If you need $1 million to turn into $5 million, you're going to have to go to something more aggressive. Say, let's talk real estate for a moment, right?
Okay.
If I put money into real estate, let's say I put $1 million into, let's say I buy 10 homes with $100,000 down payment. It doesn't matter the 10 homes. It doesn't matter the down payment. The only thing that matters is 3 letters, ROI. Last year, my average ROI was 34% on my passive real estate holdings.
Okay.
My actual ROI was closer to 50%. But guess what? That's not 75 to 100%. So I can't put into real estate because I could turn 1 million into 3 million in 5 years, but I may not turn 1 into 5 million. So I'm going to pass over real estate, or at least the single family version that I'm talking about there. From there, there's 2 or 3 things that you can graduate to. The first one is you can learn to play a version of the stock market where you're strategically investing in companies that have 1,000, 5,000, and 10,000% 5-year upside. For example, Tesla, Apple. If you take a look at Amazon, if you got in 5 years before they hit it big, you would see, oh my gosh, I made like a 20,000% a year on my money. But the question is, how do you know who the big guys are going to be? It does take some research. You have to look at emerging fields and industries. You have to look at who the early winners are going to be. And I won't go into the whole detailed strategy of it, but you could pick 15 to 20 different companies in a rapidly emerging markets. And if you did all your proper research and had maybe 20 or 30% win rate on those picks, in hindsight, you could get to 100% ROI. I don't think that's the safest way to get there because you're like, but Kris, with the strategy, I win by losing 70% of the time. Yeah, you're not, even with your best research, you're not going to pick them. Fortunately with that strategy, because it's tied to asymmetric risk, high upside, low downside.
Yep.
If you go for high enough upside and don't plan to win even 50% of the time, you could actually win really big. I'm going to slow that down for a second before I move on to the next one, because if I lost you, I want you to understand this. Let's just say that I had $1 million, because in this example, I
just gifted it to you.
And let's just say that I wanted to make a $200,000 investment into a company, and I was going to do it 5 times. So 200,000, 200,000, 200,000. 200,000 times 5 is all $1 million gone.
Right.
So I'm looking for 5 companies, and here's my criteria. I need a company that, let's just say my standard is over 5 years will make 500% ROI. Well, 5X. Well, my first $200,000 investment 5 years later, let's just say it's worth nothing. Suck. Let's say my second company where I dropped 200 grand and I thought it was going to be the winner went to nothing. Now, in reality, they don't go to nothing, but let's just say they did.
Yeah.
Let's say the third and the fourth went to nothing. Right now, you're feeling pretty screwed because you have an 80% lose rate.
Yep.
But good news, the last one wins. And that $200,000 investment did experience the 500% increase. So 5 times 200K is $1 million.
Yep.
And because I won one of the 5 times, I won back all of my invested money because 200 grand on one investment went to $1 million. I got $1 million.
Yep.
But I lost $800,000 spread over those 4 other investments. So that's an example of what happens if your standard is set to 500% ROI. You set it to a 5,000% ROI and you just win on one of those 5 bets. Yes, you're going to make all your money. You're going to turn $1 million into $5 million. Losing 4 out of 5 times. Now, that's a diversification strategy. That wouldn't be my core. My core strategy is going to come down to 2 things, either starting a business or buying a business.
Okay.
5 years is enough time to start a business with the intention of building not revenue, but actually building value. Like, for example, look at the media companies that I'm launching, right? Like I'm launching companies. Every month I launch a new media company and my goal in 5 years is for it to be worth $50 to $100 million. My outlay on that, frankly, is only a few $100,000. Imagine if you could turn a few $100,000 predictably into tens of millions of dollars over 5 years. Well, that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm taking a lot less than $1 million and I'm making a lot more than $5 million. And that's not to illustrate my genius. That's to illustrate the power of business. Business learned correctly with proper standards means that you can put in a small amount of money and you can turn it into a lot. But here's the mistake people make with business. They do business for active income. You should always also do business for increased valuation. In other words, if you don't know how to multiply the value of your company and get it to a point where you could sell it, it's probably not a good idea. I only do businesses that have those 2 components.
Interesting.
Okay, final. How else would I take $1 million and turn it into 5?
Let's hear it.
That 5th one of what I would do is I'm a really big fan of other people's money. And so I would ask, how do I deposit $1 million into maybe a $50 million opportunity and I need 4 more million? I'll go and raise it. I got $1 million in, I get 4 more million raised. We got our 5 million and then boom, we grow that over 5 years to a $50 million return. We divide it back. I got 10 million on my return. Well, what I did is I used leverage. I put up some of my money as collateral. I put some of it up as skin in the game, and I encouraged others to invest so I could get in on a bigger deal that was more lucrative. There's a number of ideas that come to mind when you say, Kris, how do you take $1 million and turn it into 5?
Yeah, so I want to ask you a question though, because I would assume that the average Joe is going to get $1 million and not have the first idea what to do with it. What would be like the biggest mistake that you think somebody would make right out the gate?
Let me tell you what someone that inherits $1 million is going to do.
Yeah.
The first thing they're going to do is they're going to pay off their house.
Okay.
But they're going to pause and say, wait a second. What kind of house do I have? If it's not probably a $400,000 or $500,000 house, they're going to upgrade. Mm-hmm. And then they're going to buy it cash and they're going to feel good that they own their house outright. The next thing they're going to do is they're going to pay off their 2 cars and they're going to make sure that they're nicer cars. And so they might buy a $50,000 car, 2 of those. So there's another $100,000 gone. So now I'm $600,000. I'm assuming the money was tax-free, the $1 million I got. So now I got $400,000. Then they might say, well, I want $100,000 and $200,000 in retirement, AKA savings.
Yep.
You shouldn't invest that because I've never had that amount of money and it helps me, quote unquote, sleep well at night.
Yep.
Great. Now I've spent $800,000. So far, I haven't put money towards anything that makes me money. It is very easy to spend $1 million. It's a very small amount of money. $1 million, you can evaporate like that. Most people, by the way, when they win the lottery, within 5 years have lost everything.
Yeah.
Because they were advanced something they hadn't developed stewardship over. They actually don't, first of all, they don't think abundantly. They didn't think in a manner or train themselves to become someone that could actually be comfortable having money like that. And they're going to gravitate toward what they're really comfortable with, which in most people's situations, being broke, which means that one of the biggest secrets of making money is to invest in your thinking.
Yeah.
It's to literally invest in your mindset. And frankly, that's what a lot of the show's about, is just exposing everyone, you, to thoughts and ideas that can get you just more financially open-minded.
Yeah, so I 100% agree. I think I could blow through $1 million in a matter of like a day if I really put my mind to it. How much money, and we'll jump back to this in a second, but I want to ask you this question right now. How much money do people need to retire, quote unquote, comfortably? What does that number now look like? Because my dad probably would have loved $1 million.
Yeah, your dad thinks he would have loved $1 million.
Yeah.
But what you're going to do is you're going to do one of two things with it. You're either going to put it in the bank and live off of it. And when you're not earning any interest on money or very minimal interest, what a lot of people will do is they live in a scarcity mode. I know people with millions that live in scarcity. It's bizarre, but it's because they're not bringing anything new in. They're retired and they're spending down what they got. And every time they spend that money, they're thinking, am I going to outlive my money or is my money going to outlive me? And so they live in fear. So instead, what they do is they give their money to a financial planner. And the financial planner says, whoa, good job. You got $1 million. You did better than most people. I'm going to annuitize that for you. What's that word mean? Oh, that's where I'm going to take your money and I'm going to put it in the stock market in a manner where I can guarantee that I'm going to give you 3 to 4% on this money, no matter what. And you can just live off of the interest. And the person says, oh, okay, well, what is that? And let's just call it $35,000, 3.5%.
Yeah.
You give me $1 million, I'm going to give you $35,000 guaranteed every single year. So you do the math. 35,000 divided by 12 months is basically 3,000 a month. And then you add some Social Security on top of that. Let's call it a couple grand. Now you're sitting at $5,000 a month. That's $60,000 a year. Here's what most people don't know. You're telling me that I got $1 million saved up and all I'm going to live off of is $60,000 a year? Well, like it or not, that's what you get.
Yeah.
So in that model, you're living off of the interest. You're not consuming your principal, and that's the safety of that measure. But if you're like, shoot, $60,000 is that's not really what I dreamed for the next 20 or 30 years of my retirement. Well, that's why we say, I mean, if you wanted to comfortably retire honestly with a 6-figure residual, you're going to need around $2.5 to $3 million.
Okay.
And most people are going to say, Kris, if I make the average American income in this country, I will earn 1.7 million years over 40, $1.7 million over 30 years, 40 years. You can't even earn $2 million. You can't even earn $2 million in 40 years. So how the crap are you going to save $2 to $3 million? That's why everyone must become an investor. Everyone has to become a scrimper and a saver, not to sock it away in some stupid bullcrap 401k. It's to put the money and learn how to invest, learn the rules, open a business, do something. And please don't default to society's financial game plan because trust me, they've got nothing but very low single digits to offer you. And I promise you, that's not what the rich do. The rich are like, well, I made billions of dollars successfully, and now I'm going to give it to the financial planners to give me a couple of percent. I'm going to put it in an IRA. They don't do that. Why are we doing that? Do what the rich do if you want to be rich.
Yeah.
Do what the poor do if you want to be poor.
Amazing. Surround yourself with people who got it going on, right? All right. So the likelihood of somebody inheriting $1 million.
Super high. Right? Aunt Guinevere.
Yeah.
Bless her heart.
Everybody wants that aunt or uncle they don't know about to come in and give you a bunch of money. Probably not going to happen. So I want to challenge you a little bit, Kris. I know you've got a bunch of different investment strategies. Let's say there's a more realistic ask or a difficult ask, I guess, of me to you, but a more realistic scenario.
You don't want the $1 million. You want a small number.
Yeah, I got to start with a small number.
Can I give you a number?
Please give me a number.
I think that if someone busts their hump for 10 years, they're going to put 50 grand in a 401k or an IRA. They're going to put, listen, if you own a house, you have 50,000 of equity, I promise.
For sure. Yeah.
Because the values have gone up so much. So yeah, sure. What could someone do with $50,000?
Yeah.
I'll
give you the same 5-year time frame even.
Well, let me break it down for you. $50,000 is enough to buy a single family property. And you're like, but Kris, didn't you say that you're getting 25, 34% on that money? Like, that won't get me rich in 5 years. You're right. I want you to listen to the math. If you buy a property, and let's just say it minimally grows at 25%, then for 5 years, that's 25 plus 25 plus 25 plus 25 plus 25. That's 125. Take off the last 25% for selling costs and fix-ups and whatever, and you basically have 4 years at 25%. You have 100 grand.
Yep.
You put 50 in, you got 100% return. The 50 grand is turned into 100 grand. At year 5, sell off the real estate, go buy 2 houses instead of 1. If you did the same thing 5 years later, you could sell the 2 and buy 4. And if you did the same thing at year 10, you could sell the 4 and you could buy 8. And at year 15, you could sell the 8 and buy 16. And by year 20, you could sell the 16 and buy 32. And guess what happens when 25% compounds over 20 years? 50 grand turns into the possibility of $4.3 million. And you know what? That's real retirement. That's now something real that a person can enjoy. And guess what? It didn't take 40 years. It took 20 years. And let me tell you where I came up with this math. I find that people in their 20s are getting educations and starting careers. I find that people in their 30s are accumulating a little bit of money. And give me someone who's 40 years old. Please, please, please tell me they got $50,000 saved up between savings, 401ks, IRAs, or equity in a home. Yeah. 50 grand is enough in a nest egg to enact the plan that I just shared, where over 20 years, you could turn that into a couple $1 million.
Yeah, and I mean, realistically, that 50 grand, that's a more realistic number gifted to you, right?
A person could work their butt off and save that.
That's something that you can do, no problem. You take that same philosophy and you go, okay, what if I don't have 50 grand? I'm really going to hold you to the fire on this one.
Let's say you have no grand.
Let's say I have no grand. Let's say I'm starting out. Let's just say I'm listening to the podcast right now and I'm like, yeah, but Kris, I have got
no, let's say you got nothing.
Let's say I got nothing and I'm paycheck to paycheck.
No, you got nothing. You're paycheck to paycheck and you've got bad credit.
And I got bad credit. Yeah,
Great. And student loans.
And student loans. What am I supposed to do now?
I got $50,000 and $100,000, $120,000 student loans.
I can barely buy food.
Yeah, so you're check to check. You got bad credit. You got student loans, and you got nothing in the bank.
Help me get somewhere. Where do people
You just,
start?
by the way, described what my life looked like, minus the student loan debt. You described what my life looked like when I was a starving college kid, newly married, and I was nowhere to go. And 4.5 years later, I was financially free.
Yeah.
And I want to be clear, 4.5 years later, while I had a net worth of $1.6 million, I never cared about that number. The number I cared about was $12,000 that passively came into my bank account every month that meant I could quit my job. While everyone else was graduating, I quit my job.
Yeah.
So how did I do that in 4.5 years?
I think everybody would love to know, because I specifically remember a story of your sweet wife and you finding some Skittles or something in her backpack.
Dude, I found a Skittles wrapper in my wife's backpack, and I remember I felt so betrayed. We were pinching pennies. I remember she came home from school, and I held it up. I'm like, tears in my eyes. Clem, what is this? How could you do this to us? It was so pathetic. It was like 65 cents.
I love it.
That's how poor we were. That's how broken my financial mindset was.
So how did you get to that number?
Yeah. So here's what I did. First thing that I did, which is something everyone can do, listen to this, is I discovered this plan sucks. And by this plan, I mean society's game plan. I'm like, got it. Go to college, rack up a bunch of debt, work for someone else after you get a piece of paper that says you're smart, work for 40 years, and then wind up with a couple $100,000 and be shy a few million. That's what I got it. I got the math at 21. And so at that age, I found a mentor. I found someone who had made over $10 million in real estate. I said, teach me, sensei. And I didn't find one. I found 3 mentors. And one of them didn't like me and wouldn't work with me. Boo. And one of them I ended up doing some ladder deals with. But the first one that really took me serious enough to let me just tag along, follow him around, he looked at my situation and his advice said, you know, Kris, if you will work hard for 14 months and save up $5,000, you will have a 2-year job history now. And this is a game plan that I give young people all the time. If you have a 2-year work history and you get your credit fixed, by the way, it costs a little bit of money, do it. And you save up $5,000, he said, that's enough for you to buy a piece of real estate. Now, mind you, in today's world, that'll work in some markets, but for the current national median, you're probably going to need closer to $9,000 or $10,000.
Okay. We
were freaking poor. We saved up the $5,000. 14 months later, I had stayed at the job when I would have left because I learned I needed 2-year work history in the same industry. I got some credit cards. I got my credit where it needed to be, and I had my $5,000. And guess what happened the next month? I bought my first property. I rented out the basement, and I lived for free. Now I was pocketing money that should have been going towards a mortgage. And what it did is it allowed me to save money faster. But after 12 months, the house had gone up in value. I already bought it below value. And the bank said, well, you had a $20,000 line of credit tied to your house, tied to that equity. Here's a credit card with your house's name on it. So I took that credit card and you know what I did? I bought another house. The down payment, the $20,000 down payment for this next property came from my first house. It didn't come out of my pocket. It didn't come out of my pocket. Boom, right out of thin air because of how I bought the very first home. On the second house, guess what I did? I took the equity from it and I bought a third house. I kept doing this until I had 25 properties.
Wow.
So, sure, after 5 years, I started from nothing and had 1.6 million net worth. But that 1.6 was meaningless. What I had was a residual. So I want to be clear. It's not how much money do you need for retirement. It's how much of a residual do you need for retirement.
Yeah, that makes sense. You said two things in there that really stuck out to me. And I want to make sure that we pass these gems on to whoever's listening. First thing is, you said takes a little bit of money to fix your credit. Talk to me. How do you, if you're broke, credit's awful, how do you fix your credit?
There's this cool black box that is likely in your pocket. You might even be holding it in your fingers. It's called a smartphone.
Okay.
And you go to Dr. Google and you say credit repair. And then you call 5 companies and you find one.
Okay.
It's that dumb.
Easy as that.
Yeah. I'm like, pick the right company, but
Sure.
like, this is not rocket science.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's readily available for everybody to fix their credit.
Yeah. And it might be a few $100, or it could be $1,000. It's worth it. Get that entry level asset where it can serve you.
Yeah.
If you've been late on payments, that doesn't mean you can't have good credit 3 months from now, 6 months from now.
It's that fast of a turnaround.
It can be.
That's awesome.
It can be. Everyone's credit situation is different.
Yeah.
You know, some situations are worse than others. And by the way, if your credit is unrepairable, you're not screwed.
Right.
You need to rent somebody else's.
Yeah.
So by the way,
other people's money,
I
right?
rent people's credit all the time. I'm like, would you like a couple $1,000s to do this highly lucrative deal? My buddy, he did one of these like 7 years ago, sold the house. I made $100,000 on it. I wrote him a $2,500 thank you check.
That's awesome.
And I wrote him a $2,000 check at the start. And 7 years later, a $2,500 check. I made all the payments. He made $4,500. And guess what? Totally happy.
Yeah.
I made $100,000. I'm good.
Yeah.
Right? So get a little creative.
That's awesome. The second and potentially the last thing here I want to talk to you about is the other thing you said was how did you found mentors? You found 3 mentors.
Yeah.
How do you go about finding a mentor? Like especially when you might be broke,
It's
right?
so simple.
How do you find them?
It's so simple. It just starts with an intention.
Okay.
It's a decision. You just decide, I need a mentor. This might be the biggest thing you guys are listening to. You have to decide right now, look at your life and ask yourself, what's going well and what's not? If you're fat, you need a health mentor. If you're financially in debt, you need a money mentor. If your marriage is on the rocks, you need a relationship mentor, right? Go find someone that has already aced it. They've aced it 100 times over. They've figured it out. And then get in a relationship where that person can teach you and help you. A mentor is not a coach. It's not someone that has information. A mentor has done it successfully, probably 100 times or 1,000 times. So they have all the shortcuts. They can give you the quickest guide to the top of the mountain. And so you're like, well, Kris, how do I find them? Start by just deciding, where do you need a mentor? And be greedy. It's okay if you need more than one mentor because, consciousness, the universe is going to favor the conscious. So get conscious. Where do you need mentor? Where do you need help? Write that down. I'm attracting a multimillionaire mentor. Great. Think that thought, declare it, and then go look for it. You'll find it. It won't take long. We find, by the way, what we're looking for. So it just starts with knowing what you want to look for.
How often do you have to keep that? You call it your mind palace. How often do you have to keep rehearsing that in your mind palace that I'm looking for a mentor. I need a mentor. This is what I'm looking for.
Your brain will kick out 60,000 thoughts a day. And if you don't use your brain, it'll use you. And it's going to cycle through 60 to 70,000 thoughts a day. There was a point where I realized that my mind is a tool and it allows me to harness consciousness and intention. So I want to become aware of my thoughts and I want to start directing the thoughts that are going to serve me. So how many times a day? Oh, dude, I was desperate. So constantly, I'm looking for a mentor. I'm looking for a mentor. I'm looking for a mentor, a multimillionaire mentor, a mentor that can show me how to make money, right? And over again. And guess what? I found my mentor so fast because I was obsessed with what I wanted. So the universe and success also often serve up and favor the obsessed. That doesn't sound very healthy, but I promise you, obsessing over a good thing will lead to a result faster than taking a lackadaisical approach of, when the right mentor presents itself, who knows? No, that's wishy-washy. Don't be wishy-washy. I'm finding a mentor today that has made millions of dollars and going to show me how to do it as well. It may or may not happen today, but with that level of intensity, you sure as heck are going to have a better shot than the next guy. I mean, you're literally on the lineup. You're going to bet on an Olympian. They're going to go into the 500-meter race, and there's 7 of them lined up. One of them is jumping up and down with crazy amounts of energy, like, I got this in the bag, baby. And like the other 6 are sleeping. Who are you going to put money on? Dude, right now, the universe also favors the energetic.
Yeah.
So pour energy into the thing that you want, and for heaven's sake, stop putting energy into the thing that you don't want, which is so typical human. Outgrow that garbage.
Yeah, 100%. What does that conversation look like? I can see people on being like, yeah, I will manifest all day long, but I'm going to go up to that mentor and I'm going to be like, blah, 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 right? How did you approach your mentors?
Good. First of all, go up to the mentor and go, blah, blah, blah. I want you to do that. It's better than allowing fear to dictate no conversation. It's better than having your knees shake sitting in your seat, wetting yourself. Like, listen, the universe also favors those that try and put out effort.
The bold.
Yes. So just go be bold and audacious. Dude, I went up to my very, very, very first mentor, made over $10 million in real estate. I didn't have his phone number. I tracked down his address. I knock on his house at 10 p.m. at night. And I remember when he opened the door, he looked at me. He's like, Kris? I'm like, yeah, I'm here to learn from you. Slammed the door in my face, never saw the dude again. So like, this is a great example of how taking initiative didn't work. But because I kept taking initiative, guess what? The universe favors initiative. So I eventually won. I got my second mentor to line up. I got my third to line up. And today I still have mentors, literally mentors as a 41-year-old succeeding in these verticals, saying, teach me in those verticals.
Yeah, I love it. Hey, Kris, any parting words as we wrap up this on finding mentors, on taking a little bit of money, making lots of money?
Don't wait for Aunt Jemima to give you $1 million. Realize that even if you start with nothing, that consciousness, beautiful intentions, and then taking action on it will take you further than any amount of gifted money.
Awesome. I love it. Thank you so much for joining us on the Have It All show. We'll see you guys soon.